What if I told you that the world's most powerful military could actually lose a war against a nation it's been sanctioning for decades? It sounds almost impossible, right? But a fascinating geopolitical analysis makes a really compelling case for why, in a head-to-head conflict with Iran, the United States might not come out on top. So let's dig into the surprising arguments behind that very bold prediction.
Really think about that question. Could the U.S. lose a war against Iran? It just challenges everything we assume about modern warfare. On one side, you have the most advanced, most expensive military in human history. And on the other, you have a nation that's been under unbelievable pressure for over 40 years. This analysis argues that the key here, it isn't just about counting tanks and jets. It's something else entirely.
And believe it or not, the analysis concludes with a simple, direct yes. The argument is built on what it calls 3 strategic pillars, and they paint a picture of a nation that is surprisingly resilient and way more capable than you might think. So let's explore each one and see how this whole argument fits together. Okay, so our first pillar is what's called asymmetric firepower. Now, this isn't about some conventional arms race, who has the better fighter jet. It's about a totally different approach to war, one that's all about using unique strengths to create a huge, outsized impact.
Think about it. When most of us hear the word drone, we picture those little things that fit in your hand, for taking cool videos. But the Shahad 136, well, it's a completely different beast. We're talking about something the size of a small aircraft, and it's basically a flying bomb, packing a serious punch with a pretty big explosive payload. And here's where the strategy gets really clever. These things are cheap to make, and Iran has thousands of them just sitting in underground bunkers ready to go. They're simple, yeah, but brutally effective. Just imagine you're trying to shoot down a swarm of thousands of these things with missiles that cost millions of dollars apiece. It's an economic and logistical nightmare for even the most advanced defense system.
And if you want the ultimate proof that these things work, well, the U.S. military is now developing its own drones based on very similar Iranian designs. You know what they say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. When your biggest rival starts copying your homework, you know you're onto something.
So how do they use them? Well, the strategy is beautiful in its simplicity. It's just a 3-step plan. Instead of trying to punch through super sophisticated missile defenses head-on, step 1 is to find the radars. Step 2, take out those radars, America's eyes and ears. And once the defenders are blind, step 3 is to send in the drone swarms to hit basically undefended targets. All right, on to our second pillar. And this one reveals a really fascinating paradox, a sanction-proof economy. You'd think that decades of crippling sanctions would have brought Iran to its knees, but this analysis argues the exact opposite has happened. It's made them tougher, more innovative, and, believe it or not, incredibly self-reliant.
And this timeline, wow, it really puts it all into perspective. This isn't something that just started. We're talking about nearly half a century of constant economic pressure. From freezing their assets way back in '79 to the collapse of the nuclear deal more recently, this has been a slow-motion economic war. And according to the analysis, you can't understand today's situation without understanding this history.
To really get the deep-seated anger and mistrust, we have to go back to the event that kicked this whole thing off, the American hostage crisis. For 444 agonizing days, 52 American diplomats were held captive in Tehran. This wasn't just some political spat. It was a national trauma that basically shattered the relationship between these two countries forever.
The financial hit was just massive. The U.S. froze $12 billion of Iranian money. And here's the real kicker. According to the source, even after the hostages were finally let go, Iran only ever saw a fraction of that money again, about $2.8 billion. From Iran's point of view, you can see how that would feel like a huge betrayal, one that planted the seeds of a deep, lasting mistrust.
The impact on the average person in Iran has been absolutely devastating. Just let this number sink in for a second. Since 1979, Iran's currency has lost its value 20,000 times over. Can you even imagine your life savings becoming basically worthless? That kind of sustained economic pain has forced the country into a very simple choice: adapt or completely collapse.
And that choice leads us directly to our third and, you could argue, most important pillar, the force of resilience. This isn't about technology. It's not about economics. It's about the human spirit. It's about what happens to a nation, to a people, when they've been pushed to their absolute limit for generations.
So, to deal with this constant pressure, Iran developed this unique national strategy they call the resistance economy. And it's a fascinating idea, really. The goal isn't just to survive the sanctions, it's to actually use them as fuel. They've managed to turn their isolation into a catalyst for innovation and self-sufficiency, basically flipping a huge weakness into a source of national pride and strength.
And the results of this strategy? They're genuinely stunning. With the world's markets basically closed off to them, Iran's own scientific output exploded. Today, they produce almost all of their own medicines. They've developed their own advanced military gear, everything from sophisticated missiles to jet engines. And sometimes, incredibly, they do it by reverse engineering captured American tech.
Now, this next point might challenge some of your ideas about Iran. The source points out a pretty remarkable statistic. 70% of Iran's science graduates are women, and the research is actually being used all over the world. This isn't just a number, it's a testament to their intense focus on building a modern, knowledge-based economy completely from the ground up.
And this resilience, it goes way beyond just science and the military. Just take a look at this comparison from the source material. Despite all the sanctions, all the isolation, Iran still ranks 20th in the world in men's soccer and has a seriously impressive Olympic record. In so many ways, this is a nation that consistently punches well above its weight, and that speaks to a deeper national spirit, a real capability.
So when you start putting all these pieces together, the clever asymmetric firepower, the battle-hardened economy, and this deep-seated culture of resilience, you have to ask a really fundamental question. What does it even mean to win or lose a war these days? And that brings us right back to where we started, to that shocking prediction that America could lose a war with Iran. The really crucial insight from this whole analysis is that losing doesn't necessarily mean a military defeat in the way we usually think about it. It means a failure to achieve the ultimate strategic goal.
And let's be really clear about this difference. A tactical victory is winning a single battle, right? Like you destroy a military base. But a strategic victory, that's winning the whole war. That's achieving your ultimate objective, like making an entire regime collapse. They are two very, very different things.
And this, right here, is the core thesis of the entire analysis. The United States, with its just overwhelming military might, can absolutely win tactical victories against Iran, no doubt. But its ultimate strategic goal, to break the will of the Iranian people and force the collapse of their nation, that's seen as nearly impossible. And why? Because it's really hard to break something that's been forged in the fire of 45 years of constant pressure. The analysis wraps up with this really powerful, cyclical quote. It suggests that these decades of hardship have created a nation that is resilient in ways that are hard to measure, and even harder to defeat with just military power. It leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? In this complex world of modern geopolitics, what is the true measure of a nation's strength? Is it the size of its army, or is it the strength of its spirit?